This is the Dangerous Age podcast, and it's all about the myth, the muck, and the magic of menopause and beyond. And my name's Georgina Langdale. I hope that this finds you well. I'm a woman in my mid-50s, and I went through menopause a few years ago now, long enough to know that when I open a handbag I haven't used for a while and there's a tampon in it, I think, oh my God, it's been ages since I've opened this handbag. Anyway, menopause, I think it is a really amazing life transition, and there's a lot of really great stuff about it, but there's a lot of quite confounding stuff and challenging stuff that we end up going through as we go through the menopause transition. And so I thought it would be a really great idea to have a chat with a health professional about the menopause change. And I've invited a wonderful GP with me here today, Dr. Samantha Newman. Not only is Sam a GP, she also absolutely specializes in women's health and has her own private clinic and does virtual consultations, fantastic, called Female GP. And today, Sam is going to be looking primarily at HRT. We're also going to have a quick look at Mirenas and even incontinence. We've got a lot of bases covered in this show, so I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the Dangerous Age. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Pretty humbled to be here. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about women's health, which I love to do. So yeah, no, thank you so much.
Great. Oh, that's great. We've been really lucky because we've kind of teamed up a few times now around women's health. And I just love that kind of integrated approach to women's health care. But I have to ask you first up, when you're at medical school and you're training and things, there are so many directions you can go in. What made you choose focusing on women's health?
Well, I think it kind of evolved, to be honest. When I look back, I've always been interested in the application and the understanding in science. And then with a recurrent kind of like psychological aspect, I did my BSc in neuroscience. And then I really enjoyed like my obs and gynae runs and my GP runs and the communication aspects and getting to know my patients. And then I started off in obs and gynae on a training program in Northwest London. And then my husband and we got married and we came to New Zealand. And then I had a really special patient. And it was while I was working in obs and gynae. And I realized what I love most is the communication and getting to know this family through these really challenging aspects of their medical journey. So literally that was a really kind of changing point in my career, because I decided right then that I just wanted to focus on working with women and what I enjoyed. And it kind of basically went from there.
Right. So you have a clinic called Female GP. Can you talk a little bit about that, please? Because I think that's going to be of interest to women, not just in Hawke's Bay. So watch out.
Yeah. So it started as like this really opportunistic, literally as a service provision. So after I had this revelation, I spent a year looking at focusing on what can I deliver in primary care as a GP, using the skills that I've learned. What are my areas of kind of comfort? And so I realized pelvic health, so prolapse, pessaries, and pelvic pain were areas that I thought I could manage well as a GP. And to cut a long story short, in the practice I was working in at the time, they weren't happy because there's just a shortage of GPs, me seeing women outside of the practice when they had their own patient load to care for. And I'd said my dream's always to integrate women's health into my general GP work. That's what my dream is. But they said, no, I couldn't do that. And I knew that I needed to find a way to be able to deliver healthcare to women that weren't in my practice. And Hawke's Bay is pretty small, word of mouth. One of the managers at the local health centre, I'd worked with her daughter. She'd worked with my husband. My husband then worked with her daughter. And a physio I worked with, and they were like, well, just come here. You've got a room. Just come and rent a room. And so I was able to just start my hobby medicine, which is what I called it, practicing half a day every other week, just enjoying and loving medicine. And over that time, I just focused on getting a good grounding and actually just learning from my patients. So learning what women wanted to help them with their like pelvic health. And then the first lockdown, I did a Facebook post. Until then, I'd not done any advertising. It had all just been word of mouth. And I just got completely blown away and then was fully booked for a month. And from then on, it's just grown.
So you can do consultations with women online, can't you, as well? They don't have to be with you in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's we're like, everybody has all these negative connotations about COVID. And don't get me wrong, like there's a lot of negative things that's happened. But I think actually it's challenged how I deliver medicine. And in the first lockdown, I was like, I still want to practice. I love medicine. I love what I'm doing. And so I started kind of like, women wanted to see me and not wait till when we could do face-to-face. So I started playing about with Zoom consults. And actually they've been great. And I feel I've got a good relationship with the women that I see virtually. I'm all about, though, ensuring that the relationship with the GP, so a primary care practitioner or family doctor, is supported and maintained, and they provide that kind of more general health advocacy and health support, so I can focus on the stuff I'm better at and more interested in. I'm pretty risk averse, so I like it that women would still be happy if I feel they need an examination or need labs, would still be able to go and see somebody local.
Great.
For that. Yeah. And the other thing with COVID, which just with respect to kind of technology, that I expect that you've found as well, Georgina, is opening up the world. So I felt really isolated here doing this, like my kind of menopause approach, but it was what gold standard, what's practiced worldwide. So I got in touch with doctors internationally, and now I've got some great colleagues that I can ask for all these complex questions, and now that I can give advice to as well, that we can bounce off. So it's pretty amazing.
One of the things I love about this discussion with Sam is the way that she describes hormones and really takes us beyond what we may think they just do, because they just do so much more.
Every woman pre-menopause is in essence estrogen dominant and has a low progesterone. And I say that because actually I kind of say like the ovary knows that it can do it, but it's getting a bit tired. So it's busting its gut and just pumping out that estrogen as much as it can before it needs to go and have a little sleep and rest for forevermore. And so it makes sense because hormones have such an impact on us. That's what hormones do. Hormones control us in positive and negative ways. And there's so many hormones, but it makes sense that we will feel different because of the impacts of these hormonal changes.
Yeah. And
then, okay, so where does estrogen react? Well, there's estrogen receptors all over the body. And estrogen as a hormone binds to these receptors all over the body. So even just in a nutshell, kind of like going from the top down. So looking at hair. So hair estrogen interacts and with collagen in hair. So it makes sense as estrogen drops, then hair changes. Eyes, you get more eye dryness because estrogen helps the barrier of the eye and keeps moisture in the layers. Temperature changes because estrogen reacts with the temperature thermostat. Joints, estrogen's an anti-inflammatory, and there's estrogen receptors in our joints. We get muscle wasting and more fatigue. And metabolism changes because there's estrogen receptors in muscles. So as we get less muscle, as we get less estrogen, then we get more muscle wasting. And that's why sarcopenia, so actual muscle wasting, is much more common in postmenopausal women. Okay, so I've just said perimenopause, estrogen surging, and then I've said all of these symptoms of estrogen deficiency in essence.
Yeah.
That kind of doesn't make sense. Well, actually, if we look at it as an estrogen surging, but it's also declining as well. So if estrogen has receptors all over the body and it's changing this much, then it makes sense that actually the perimenopausal period, and we can come to what that is, that can be really unsettling.
Yeah.
And you can really feel that you've got a lot of women feel a loss of control. And I think I've got dementia, or I almost drove down the road the wrong way. I lost my keys for like the 5th time, or I used to be able to organize the grandchildren or the children. And I now almost feel a bit mean, but I just sit back there and I nod and I smile and I'm like, all I want to do is share with you why you are feeling like this, particularly pre-period when those estrogen levels have gone from really high to really low. Yeah. Because it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think then if you break it down, and I've got some diagrams that I've made that show these changes throughout the menstrual cycle and also where there are estrogen receptors on the body. It kind of helps put into perspective what could be going on.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to, move into, well, actually, how does it affect you? Because it's so broad and so vast. And some women don't get any hot flushes, but just get overwhelming anxiety. So I don't like to say these are, common symptoms because I think that kind of almost downplays what some women might just get joint symptoms.
Yeah.
I suppose the biggest thing is just I'm not myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It's quite a rambling answer. Sorry, I hope it
makes sense. I think it's really helpful for women to hear that. And I've got this sort of image in my head of, the last gasp of estrogen, so it's going, whoa, we're going, and then party's over. One of the topics that always seems to get back round to in the menopause discussion is hormone therapy. And I think that what I'm seeing from letters and stuff that I'm getting from women asking about where do I go for information is a request for an idea of the sort of pros and cons of hormone therapy, because we're just not given the information to even begin to think about that. Could you talk about the kind of pros and cons?
Yes, I think it's a really individual decision. And I think of, hormone replacement therapy, which can also be called menopausal hormonal therapy, as almost supporting what your beliefs are and what your values are. And what makes me really sad is seeing women actively saying, I've been suffering for years and now I've got my life back.
Yeah.
And I would give a biased perspective because that's what I see day in and day out.
And are you saying I got my life back since going on hormone replacement therapy? Completely. And is there a timeline that it should happen? I mean, is there a sort of window for using that therapy or not?
Yeah, and that's really changing at the moment, actually. So if we look at the history of hormone therapy, and I think you can't understand why people are scared of it unless you look at the history. So when it was first created, it was created for cardiovascular benefit, so improve heart health and longevity for women. And, actually, the studies were kind of unfounded. Yep, absolutely. It definitely improved all of these things. And hormone therapy consists of estrogen. Yeah. And I've just talked about how there are estrogen receptors everywhere, and also progesterone, because one of the things we haven't talked about is that one of the roles of estrogen in our reproductive years is to thicken the lining of the womb, to make a little bed for a baby to develop. So therefore, even if you're giving this when somebody doesn't need to make a little bed for a baby to develop, it will still thicken the lining of the womb. And uncontrolled thickening of the lining of a womb will lead to endometrial cancer. And we found that out in the 1970s, and now nobody would give what we call unopposed estrogen without the progesterone that stops that. So that's why generally most women who have a womb, have a uterus, need 2 medications to prevent that endometrial thickening.
And therefore that is making it a much safer proposition than it was in the 70s, by the time the 70s.
Definitely. So back then, absolutely, we saw huge rates of endometrial cancer, and then they added in progesterone. And actually, nowadays, with appropriate hormone therapy, the rates of endometrial cancer in women on hormone replacement therapy are less than the baseline population.
Gosh, that's
a pretty a reassuring statistic.
Yeah.
So that's the one point of why you have the 2 medications. But the real point of why everybody got scared about HRT was actually a real media faux pas. So there was a really big study called the Women's Health Initiative, which was published in the early 2000s, that said all women on HRT will have increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, and breast cancer. And the study was discontinued prematurely. Right. So if you have been told that a study of thousands and thousands of women, 1, there is no way you would take that medication. And 2, there is no way as a health professional who wants the best for your patients that you would prescribe it.
Yeah.
So, but now there's a lot more information known. The media released that without formal medical guidance as well. So that's a really big thing too. And actually, when we look at the contents of that study, the average age of women was 63. So the average age of menopause is 51.
Yeah.
So therefore, the majority of the women have had 12 years with no estrogen. And some of the side effects of no estrogen are the buildup of what we call atherosclerotic plaques. So they're the things that can lead to heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure in the vessels, in our arteries. Yeah. And then you give somebody estrogen and that destabilizes the plaques and you have an increased risk of heart attack and stroke. Starting someone on hormone therapy in their late 40s or 50s, when they've got no buildup, you're going to prevent that buildup. And there's now really, really good evidence that hormone replacement therapy decreases the risk of heart attacks and strokes and prolongs life expectancy by 3 to 9 years.
Gosh, well, that's really fascinating. And we just don't hear about that at all. Thank you. That's really helpful. I think women will find that very helpful. So then I have a follow-up question to that. So if a woman has gone through menopause, their periods have ceased, but they're still, I don't know, getting the odd hot flush or feeling depressed or having whatever's going on. Can they start HRT some years after the period ceasing? Is it used in that situation, or is their health concerns treated in a different way?
Yeah, and I think that's where it really becomes individual, providing there's no other comorbidities, so no other medical history, with kind of, you know, some of the conditions you're saying, like hot flushes and mood changes, vaginal symptoms, as well as joint pains. If you're within 10 years of your last menstrual period or under 60, the benefits are thought to outweigh the risks. Right. After 60, so when you've had 10 years of no estrogen, then it's thought that with appropriate HRT medication, and we can talk briefly about that, then potentially you don't get the cardiac benefits. Right. And there might be some increased risks. Right. And I always bring it back to actually, how do you feel? Because if you are really tired because you are having hot flushes, or you can't go out and walk with your friends or walk the 100 meters to the beach because you're just so sore, then actually that's going to be increasing the risk of all the chronic diseases and heart attacks and strokes. So I think it has to be a really individualized risk management and discussion so that you feel empowered that your decision is right for you.
Yeah.
And why I said about the right HRT preparation, I'll just say really briefly. So the WHI study was predominantly oral estrogen, which is metabolized by the liver, so increases the risk of blood clots, and a progestogen, so a synthetic progesterone that is known to increase breast cancer risk and heart risk and be less well tolerated. Nowadays, my gold standard hormone therapy generally consists of transdermal estrogen, so estrogen that gets absorbed through your skin. I use a body identical estrogen, so it doesn't go through the liver, so it doesn't increase the risk of strokes, and also a body identical progesterone. And this is a micronized progesterone. It's a smaller molecule, so it can cross the brain and actually do what our own natural progesterone does, which is help with sleep, help with hot flushes, and help with joint pains, as well as protect against endometrial cancer.
Gosh. Oh, that, I think there'll be women listening to this going, hurrah. It's really encouraging to hear that this is no longer a kind of cookie cutter approach.
I love it. And that's what makes it so interesting. And we were saying just before we came on air that I'd love to, collaborate with you, because I'm asked constantly about hormone therapy and I love it. And it becomes my go-to because women, that's what they want. But actually what I love is that HRT is just part of the picture.
Yeah.
And if you actually are eating McDonald's every night, if you have no desire to get off your sofa and other than to walk to the bathroom, and you're not depressed, so that's just you, giving you HRT is not going to do anything.
Yeah.
But actually we need to work on everything. We need to work on the pelvic health. We need to work on the balms, the creams, keeping physically active, keeping our brain active, not just taking any form of medication, because that's going to decrease my stats. So
that's great. I'd love to do that.
I should just mention here that Dr. Newman is referring to collaborating with me because I have a business called Arceus, and for a number of years now, I've been making a range of products for helping women going through menopause. And if you're interested, that range is called NatFem, and there will be links in the program notes and in the blog below. And the kind of hero products within this range are natural and organic, vegan and non-vegan balms for helping with vaginal dryness. And also I do quite a lot of work around nature-based care and ecotherapy and coaching, and helping women really navigate their way through key life transitions. So just in case you were wondering. Okay, back to the main program.
You gave a talk recently in Napier, and you invited me along to say a few words because, of the stuff that I'm making and things, and you've got patients that are using it. And one of the top things you talked about quite a lot in that talk was the Mirena. And could you just explain to here why and when you think the Mirena is a great intervention to help women as they're in perimenopause?
Absolutely. But can I first of all just say how we met?
Yes, please do. Why not?
I had heard from a lot of patients about NatFem balm as a cream that helps vaginal health, and I needed other tools in my toolkit because I have evolved to doing a lot of vulval medicine and I really enjoy it. I love it. So I decided that I'd buy some things for myself to find out what are my patients going on about. The samples that you gave me that day, I think lasted me about 2 days. And I now stock NatFem balm because I think I think I've sold like a quarter of what I bought off of you to in my clinic already. And I use it for everything personally. So I run and I literally I put it under my sports bra, or like under my arms to stop chafing on like long distance running. I have it on my desk at work, so it's a great lip balm.
Yeah.
If my skin's a bit itchy from like my mask dermatitis, I put it on then as well. So
well, you're doing good stuff. I kind of figure, you know, when I made it, I often smile to myself thinking, I've made this to go in like the most delicate part of a woman's body. If it can go there, quite frankly, it can go anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. So it's great.
But let's return just back to that point about the Mirena, because it was interesting what you were saying about that in our talk.
Yeah, so I think the Mirena is an absolutely life-changing, fantastic tool for a lot of women who it's indicated for.
So can you explain what it is first?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thanks. The Mirena is a small device that's about 2 centimeters long in the shape of a T. So it's inserted into the womb, into the uterus, by a specialist doctor or nurse who is trained to do so. It is uncomfortable. It's not a nice procedure to have. And but you know, through explanation and understanding what's happening to the body at the time, it is possible, and most women have it done in a clinic setting.
Right.
So in this little device, and women are probably fairly familiar with a copper IUD, a contraceptive. It's a similar principle, but this has got a progestogen implanted in it. And it releases a really low level of progestogen every day. And it keeps the effect local, primarily, to the lining of the womb. And so if we go back to our science, we've said in perimenopause, we're getting surging estrogen levels, which contribute to heavy bleeding. Well, if we can put some progesterone there that we know stabilizes it, it significantly decreases the blood loss during menstruation.
Right.
I think it's about understanding what the Mirena is and what it can do from an early age, because for me, you shouldn't be iron deficient. You shouldn't be not able to go out and do what you want because of fear of flooding or passing clots. The impact of iron deficiency, even on our kind of, you know, our adolescents and our mums who have got small children, and then, you know, moving into kind of, you know, perimenopause when you've got the other hormonal factors as well. Low iron impacts mood, appetite, energy, well-being, cognition, and growth in adolescence as well.
Yeah.
So it makes it's really, I find it quite sad that women are so scared of it because it's a synthetic progesterone and it's a medication.
Right.
But I think we need to be open-minded about it, because actually, if it can give you all of these benefits, so it can make your periods more manageable,
right,
improve well-being, and it actually also decreases the risk of endometrial cancer, significantly decreases the risk of endometrial cancer.
Gosh.
As well. It can stay in for 5 to 8 to 10 years, depending on the reason it's inserted for. I actually do change them earlier as well. So, for example, if someone has had it in for 2 or 2.5 years and they've had their bleeding and menstrual symptoms well controlled, then at 2.5 years, say they start developing more bothersome symptoms or some more spotting or irregular bleeding, I will change it early, and that can often settle things down again. Right. So once again, it goes back to, it's a really individualized approach. It is a synthetic progestogen, but there's no significant data, not really any data, that it does have the negative risks that the other progestogens that you take orally have. The Mirena significantly decreased the amount of hysterectomies that gynecologists do. But it also is a contraceptive. It's one of the most effective forms of contraceptive. Yeah. And then in menopausal medicine, because it thins the lining of the womb, it can be the progestogenic component in addition to estrogen therapy.
Right. We see vaginal dryness as a very common impact of going through the menopausal change.
Yeah.
Are there particular things that a woman should be watching out for or looking out for in the vulval vaginal department?
Yeah. I love vulval health, and I never thought I would. So often the vulval health is due to poor vaginal health is due to a lot of things. I think we need to bring it all the way back and need to start actually being aware, even with our children and our young girls, and I'll talk about that in a second. But then, you know, with contraceptives, you can get vaginal dryness there. Breastfeeding, any of my patients, any of my women who are breastfeeding, I always ask about vaginal dryness, because breastfeeding makes you have low estrogen, and leading to dryness. And then 25% of women have vaginal dryness in the perimenopause. So it's actually pretty common. And then 50 to 80% of women experience vaginal dryness post-menopause. So when you look at what is vaginal dryness, well, we've kind of, you know, we've touched on bits that the skin gets thinner. So actually the skin loses that moisture, that integrity, and therefore you get inflammation. So the body knows that something's wrong and it tries to heal itself, and it sends white blood cells to try and make it better. This often manifests and you develop an itch, and it just feels uncomfortable. So you can have pain wearing clothes. I've seen women that haven't even been able to wear underwear, as I'm sure you've heard the stories as well. So then I think of it as, okay, we've got a dryness. Could it be estrogen related? But we've got a skin breakdown. We've lost that moisture. So we've got the inflammatory component. So I always approach it from those two angles. And a lot of the time it's discussing with women the merits of addressing the inflammation. And women and even pharmacists are really scared of steroids. But when you look at what inflammation is, and we need to tell the body that actually you're okay. You know, I can understand why you're really inflamed and why you're trying to heal yourself. But right now, we just need to tell you it's okay. And that's what some steroid cream does. And actually, the genitalia love strong steroids. And ointments rather than moisturizers, rather than creams. So obviously, I do try alternatives as well, but I see the women at the end of the line. You know, and I also would ask anyone when I do a smear, is this redness normal for or is this normal for you? For some women, it's normal to have a bit of a red vulva. For others, it can be quite bothersome, but you don't feel comfortable to say. So I ask everybody. And I don't do a smear if it's really sore. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. This is going to be really sore. And I can see there's inflammation. And that inflammation isn't just on the outside, it's very likely to be in the vagina and on the cervix, and actually increase the chance of an abnormal smear and all the anxiety that would come with that. So steroid cream is one aspect. And then I use a moisturizer as well, such as Nat Fem Balm or Yes, and estrogen cream as well. And I tend to have a bit of a toolkit, and I discuss with my women, what are your priorities? Where do you sit with using these medications? Because right now I see a role for this, this, and this. I'm really happy to support you as long as I know what you're using, so I can know how to advise how to go forward.
One of the things I've noticed from emails I've received from customers of mine over the years is just how many women have something called lichen sclerosis. And so I've asked Sam if she could just talk about that for us a bit more here.
So lichen sclerosis is an inflammatory condition, very often more associated with autoimmune conditions, such as celiac disease, diabetes, hypothyroid. And you get increased incidence of autoimmune disease at menopause because of estrogen dropping, which helps with the regulation of the immune system. So yes, anytime I examine someone, I'm always on my radar, is it one of the vulval dermatoses as well? But generally, in the first instance, I manage it the same, and with education. So education that, you know what, with vulval dermatoses, so a dermatitis, an inflammation, or an atrophic vaginitis, and I still hate that phrase, then I'd expect it to get better. And depending on what things look like, I would give a timeline. And, you know, at that kind of, 6-week mark, I'd expect to get X difference. It's 3 months, I'd expect X difference. And then if we're not winning, I always go back to the beginning. So what am I dealing with? I also have a very low threshold for a biopsy.
Yep.
Because actually any vulval itch or change in skin color that's not improving, we need to be thinking of squamous cell cancer, VIN, so vulval intraepithelial neoplasia, so precancerous changes, or lichen sclerosis. Well-managed lichen sclerosis has a very low risk of progressing to cancer. A lot of the, and even I used to, we'd be, you need to have an annual check for lichen sclerosis because you're at much higher risk of developing cancer. But actually, no, if it's well managed and you respond to your symptoms, it's actually not much increased. So I suppose, my take-home messages are, don't be uncomfortable. If you've got an itch or a discomfort, do something about it and keep doing something about it until you have a management plan with normal skin on the vulva.
Great. And don't be afraid to ask. Don't just keep enduring it, thinking this is normal and this is just me and it's painful and awful, but do talk to a GP about it. One more question. Just one of my listeners, subscribers asked if I could ask you very briefly about female incontinence, what your sort of top tips are for that, for seeking help on that.
I love talking about continence, and I'm now more and more trying to talk about continence rather than incontinence. So it's so multifactorial. And I think that's my biggest message with continence. And we need to start doing some lifestyle measures to maximize continence and physical health and pelvic health from way before menopause. But at the same time, our body changes as we become postmenopausal. And one of the biggest exacerbating factors I see in incontinence in older women is constipation.
Right.
So bowels needing to open regularly, using a squatty potty.
Yeah.
No straining and complete emptying.
Right.
And I find often with appropriate bowel management, continence improves considerably. Also, there's the pressure of poo. So if you've got the bones in your pelvis, it's a confined space. There's bones there. Things can't spread. When the bladder gets bigger, if there's this big lump of stuff sitting right next to it, it can't hold it as much. So then if you move or do anything, it makes sense you might get a little bit of leakage. So if you're emptying your bowels properly, then that can really help with the bladder control. Estrogen does help a number of women with bladder leakage. So that's definitely a discussion to have. The other two things, which I think are really important take-home messages, are bladder irritants. So caffeine, including in tea, green tea and coffee, irritates the bladder, as does alcohol. So I am not saying stop drinking alcohol or tea and coffee, but if you're troubled by incontinence, weigh up how bothersome is this continence for you? Is it worth having 2 or 3 weeks with no tea, coffee, and alcohol, and see how you get on? Yeah. And often that gives you the control and a ability to prioritize how you want to go forward with things. Continence New Zealand is a fantastic charity. And I have worked with them to help quite a number of patients, and I'd love to work with them more for vulval skin cares and appropriate pad use as well. They're really accessible. They provide good leaflets. They're the ISSVD, and I imagine you can put these in your in your show links. They provide some really good patient leaflets as well. And some podcasts and webinars. DermNet is another very good dermatological resource that also happens to be New Zealand based. Jen Gunter's book, The Vagina Bible. So Jen Gunter is a fantastic obstetrician gynecologist, a fantastic communicator. Her book's it's pretty heavy going. It's got a lot of content and knowledge to give. So it's not a light reading, but one that I don't recommend it to a lot of patients because of the huge volume of information. But I think if you've got a problem you want solving and you're happy to work through things, having it as a reference book that you can dip in and out of It's really, really empowering.
Great. Sam, this has been a really helpful and informative discussion, and always lovely to see you again. I just want to also let people know before you go, you have your own radio program called Being You Health with Dr. Sam. And
it's a really and you've been on my show. My show's really chilled. It's basically just me trying to put people in health together, and as a GP, link the health services that are available in Hawke's Bay.
I'll put links in the podcast thing below for you. And also, I will also put a link in. There's a link below for female GP. What I'm hearing from what you're saying is that there is a real shift in the medical approach to menopause. So on a final note, what does the future look like for you in terms of women's health, menopause and beyond?
I am so excited. I'm also sad at the women that haven't had this opportunity. And for example, my mum and my grandma who weren't able to access the care and knowledge that we have. But I'm just so excited to be part of this movement and to be able to, it sounds really cheesy, but to be able to make a difference and to link in and, form the research of the future.
Great. That's really lovely. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. When you've got any talks and things coming up, I'll let people know through my podcast and through the newsletters and things. And I really look forward to collaborating with you again. Thank you very, very much. And see you next time.
Thank you so much, Georgina. I've really enjoyed it. And thanks for making my day.
I have a bit of a postscript to add to this story. The things that Sam was talking about really, really hit home for me. And I had never considered HRT. I thought, like so many women, you just push on through the menopause. But I'd also started to find myself getting more and more tired, feeling quite flat. I haven't had a period for 5 years, and so I thought I was out the other side of menopause. But this tiredness and this flatness just really grew. And then what was quite alarming for me was the kind of brain fog starting. Now, I absolutely do love menopause. I think this is an amazing time of life. But the discussion with Sam made me think, I wonder whether this kind of general flatness and total exhaustion and this increasing, lack of concentration was to do with my hormones rather than just the massive to-do list and the stresses and strains of everyday life. So since recording this interview with her, I then booked myself in for a private consult with her. We did this online, virtually, and it was fantastic. One of the things I loved about it is that she really gives you time to discuss what's going on for you. She arranged for me to have some blood work done, and she got me going on HRT. So easy. The script was sent through to my local pharmacy. I picked it up and away I went. Now, it hasn't been very long. It has been, for me, not quite a week. And honestly, I'm starting to feel like someone has turned the lights back on. I am really excited about the benefits of HRT for me. It wasn't something I'd ever even thought about, but already in the space of a few days, I am starting to feel, better, different. And so over the coming weeks and months, I'm going to check in with you and let you know how I'm going, because I think it's interesting. There's a lot of information out there for women who are going into perimenopause, still got periods, and they go on HRT. But we don't hear so much from women whose periods have stopped and then are starting on HRT, and I'm most definitely in that camp. So I'll let you know how it goes, but honestly, it's looking pretty good from here. Okay, so my name is Georgina Langdale. You've been listening to my Dangerous Age podcast, and I look forward to talking to you again very soon. Take care, go well, and just be fabulous.